Okay, YouTube Suspends channel of Chinese vlogger who posts about his life in war-torn Ukraine. So you'll be the judge, see if this is fair. YouTube has reportedly suspended a Chinese vlogger from posting videos of his daily life in war-torn Ukraine over a violation in content policy. Wang Xiang, a 36-year-old programmer living in the city of Odessa, has openly criticized Russia in his videos, while his native Beijing reportedly supports Moscow behind closed doors. The vlogger posted a video on Douyin on February 24th about the invasion, which Russia often refers to as a special military operation. At the time, he simply wanted to show his parents that he was doing okay. However, as Russian troops went on to destroy Ukrainian cities, Wang became an unofficial voice of Chinese resistance. After posting his first YouTube video about Ukraine, he has amassed more than 100,000 subscribers. And there he is right there. Wang's videos, however, have sparked outrage among Chinese nationalists, with some accusing him of being a national traitor. You don't need this Chinese passport anymore. You have already forgotten which country you are from, a Douyin user wrote. The official position of the country should be the position of all Chinese. It's not interesting. So, if the government has a position, you as a private citizen should adopt that position. Gee, my goodness. I have to say thank God for living in America, right? It's ridiculous. Can you imagine me adopting Trump's policy? Wang's YouTube suspension came as a result of a March 28 video. Radio Free Asia RFA reported. It features Odessa with sounds of air raid sirens and exploding missiles. The video also showed Ukrainian fighters capturing Russian soldiers, among other footage. The now deleted video also saw Wang turn his attention to Chinese media, which often parrots Russian talking points. The vlogger shared photographic evidence of Ukraine's army capturing Russian tanks, which supposedly debunks Chinese reports about how Moscow having the upper hand. In its suspension notice, YouTube declared that Wang's video included violent content. Wang, who denied the claim, said the decision was made 5 minutes after he submitted an appeal. YouTube claims that my account was reported for violent content, which violates the rules. But where is the violence? I didn't include photos of violence in my video, Wang told RFA. This was a frontline war report, he added. In my appeal, I asked them to say which video or photos weren't allowed. But within 5 minutes of my submitting the appeal, YouTube sent its final decision, which was that my account has been suspended for a week. Wang does not blame YouTube, rather he's pointing a finger at the ulterior motives of the person who reported him. Prior to the suspension, he purportedly received messages and comments that discourage him from provoking the Chinese government and being too aggressive. For now, Wang is posting videos on Twitter and his other YouTube channels. Meanwhile, all of his Chinese social media accounts have been shut down. So let's see, this guy is currently living in a war zone, and he's reporting. I mean, he's doing like what Walter Cronkite, remember? Well, Walter Cronkite in the day is reporting from Saigon or wherever in Vietnam during the height of the Vietnam War. You know, yeah, that's how it used to be back then. The military used to have you come along and you report, not report what they want you to report, but you report. And Walter Cronkite apparently said he saw that the war was a stalemate. It wasn't going anywhere, and it was time to end. And I think with that, that's when President Johnson said, well, if I lost Walter Cronkite, I lost America. You see? So Walter Cronkite was reporting what he saw. And it wasn't going well for the United States. So here is this guy reporting, and YouTube calls it violence. Well, what else is war? You know, I mean, what else is war? Instead of giving the guy a commendation for his report in a war zone, the guy's channel is suspended. You know. Meanwhile, you can look at even like radio. No, there's another station. There's another. Let me see. Back up a little, because I think the U.S. government has one of those. Yeah, Radio Free Asia, not Radio Free Asia. Another one that the U.S. government pays for. And I saw where the Ukrainians were in battle with the Russians, and they were shooting. Nobody got killed, but they were shooting back at the Russians. You see, and the Russians were shooting at them, and so forth. So it's not violent, but that was allowed, because they look at that as a news report. I think these days anybody could be a news reporter, you know, depending where you are. The criticism I have with YouTube is that they say community standards and violence and so forth. Well, if you don't like violence, then you shouldn't be in YouTube. You shouldn't be in anything like that, or you shouldn't watch certain things. Because if you look at the evening news, for example, right, a lot of the stuff that YouTube will say, well, it violates community standards, that it's violent, you can't do this, you can't put this, or what have you. It's in the TV news, and of course, TV news are sponsored by, you know, different companies, sometimes corporations. You know, like Walmart and so forth, they advertise, right? Pharmaceuticals, they advertise in the evening news, like the one that goes between 6:30 and 7. the national news from like ABC, CBS, NBC, and so forth. They all these companies pay ads, money, you know, and there's a lot of violence. Whether it's your local news, shooting, all kinds of stuff like that, there's a lot of violence out there. So this whole idea about community standards, violating community standards, to me, I think that's really wrong. Because, I mean, who made up those rules, you know? Obviously, the average person didn't. I think YouTube was the one that made up those rules. And they decide, well, this is what the community wants. Instead of saying, you know, let's ask the community what you want. Because when you look at the evening news, like I said, you see a lot of stuff going on. You see a lot of violence, and the local news has violence. You know, people being shot at and so forth. This past weekend, for example, 6 people were killed out in Sacramento. It was like night out after people came out of a club, and all of a sudden you hear a lot of gunfire, and the police were not too far from them. You know, police were right there, and they managed to kill 6 people in that time, and 1 more people. That's a lot of violence, right? So if you try to report something like, let's say you were there and you had your camera, and you try to put that on YouTube, chances are YouTube will probably might suspend your channel and say, well, you're promoting violence or what have you. I just think that's wrong, because I think like in the age when you have people like Walter Cronkite and so forth reporting from Saigon, if he were alive and he posted something in YouTube, his channel would be suspended. And I mean, let's get real. We live in a world where there's violence, okay? And yeah, if you don't like violence, fine. You don't have to tune in to certain things, because most things, like in the thumbprint or what have you, will show what you're about to see. Or sometimes YouTube has disclaimers, like age appropriate and so forth. But I just think like a lot of people are getting sick and tired of like all these community standards that YouTube has. Like they're driving away people who may be creative, who want, like this guy, for example, this Chinese guy, he was posting stuff that people really want to see. He had like, 100,000 subscribers he got like right away for the stuff he's posting. The guy was like right there in the arena, so to speak, where all the action is. I mean, the thing I notice about YouTube is that if you're like a clown and you make like people laugh, like a lot of jokes, comedians, or you do funny things or what have you, then you can really become rich. You get a lot of people. It's like sanitized, it's like going back to I guess the 1950s TV shows in America. Yeah, that's what it is. And I'm not so sure because those years were not really pleasant years for everybody, because that was before the civil rights movement. Those years, so not everybody was living well and having a nice time. Yeah, certain people were doing well, were prospering well, or what have you during those years. But I think that's the kind of sanitized version that you see that I think YouTube kind of aims for. Where like 1950s America, that kind of stuff. Leave It to Beaver, that kind of stuff like that. My Three Sons. Those old TV shows. No? Yeah, that kind of stuff that will play out. Or like telling jokes and make people laugh. Look, let's face it, we live in a real world with real stuff, real danger going on, And I think the average person will appreciate if somebody brings them the real content of what's going on out there before, like, saying, well, this person is violating this standards, violating this, and it's violence and so forth, and you shut the person's channel down. That's not right, That's not right. I mean, YouTube was created, I guess, in a country with where we tend to pride ourselves, right? In the First Amendment, we have the right to speak openly. We have the right to criticize the government and so forth. And you can't even show something about violence that's going on in a war zone. No, that's wrong. Yeah, that's wrong. And I think they need to really get their act together and change these community standards that they have, because it's community standards for whom? For whom? You want people to tell jokes? Make people laugh all the time on YouTube? Or show people what's the best food to eat, around the world? Yeah, I guess there's no trouble in that, right? You're not going to get in trouble with that if you travel the world eating food, different things. Unless maybe if you eat a dog, then yeah, you get in trouble, I guess. Animal cruelty it would be. It's really crazy. We live in some crazy times these days with all this stuff that's going on. This guy's in the war zone, and he probably could be killed. Just here in that place, Odessa, that's one of the places that the Russians really pounded. And I believe that's not too far from the Black Sea, and they have ships out there in the Black Sea, the Russians, and they can strike Odessa with missiles. Yeah, they can shoot missiles from their ships and land in Odessa. Now think about it. So can you imagine somebody showing a video or something like that? Missile? You're gonna suspend this channel? Come on. This it's really you have to ask yourself, where's the sense? So now this guy is on Twitter. He putting this stuff on Twitter. Well, I guess Twitter is a different they probably have different standards that probably allow stuff like that. Good luck to him. And also he was criticizing, he wasn't falling in line in lockstep with the Chinese government, like some people criticize him. But then again, some of these Chinese forums, if people criticizing you, it may not be a regular person, because the CCP, which is the Chinese Communist Party, they have people working. They have people working on all the media, all over, and they were I mean, like something I posted. I think it might have been in YouTube. I made a comment, and somebody came and attacked me. Yeah, let's see what it was. Yeah, they say, no, this person said that the United States, if people might remember, well, many people were not born then, but if they will remember, in history they teach about the Cuban Missile Crisis and so forth, and this person posted that the United States didn't want the Russians to put their troops, in Cuba, right? So if the United States didn't want the Russians to put their troops in Cuba, however, they would like to put missiles or whatever in Ukraine. See, that's false. The United States didn't complain about Russia putting troops in Cuba. The complaint was about putting nuclear warheads. That's what it is. Nuclear warheads in Cuba. And as we know, Cuba sits not too far from Florida, which Florida is part of the United States. So how will you feel knowing that, there's this tiny island nation has nuclear warheads aiming at you, or Washington, D.C., or what have you. So that's false, you see. And then in counteracting that, they came up with the Monroe Doctrine. And they said, well, okay, so the United States didn't want Russian troops. However, the United States had the Monroe Doctrine. Yeah, well, the Monroe Doctrine goes back to 1823. See, there's so much propaganda from the CCP. The Monroe Doctrine was signed around 1823, right? The United States had a revolution in 1776. So you go from 1776 to 1823. That's not that long. I mean, that's like nearly like what, 49 years or something. So the Monroe Doctrine didn't mean anything. I mean, at least to European powers by saying, okay, we will control here. We don't want any European power coming in here and colonizing any territory or areas in the Western Hemisphere. Yeah, but the United States was not a powerful nation in those days, so the Monroe Doctrine really meant nothing. It was just something in paper. It was like a paper tiger. It meant nothing because back in those days, in 1823, the most powerful nation on earth was the United Kingdom. Yeah, the United Kingdom. Even though they had a battle and with George Washington, with the American Revolution, then they had the War of 1812 or what have you. However, they had the Battle of Trafalgar, right? The Battle of Trafalgar that the British had, where they were able to beat the French and the Spanish, right? And this was like a maritime war on the seas, off a place called Trafalgar, Spain, where this was during the time of Napoleon Bonaparte. I think it was around 1803, something like that, and it lasted a few hours. Well, the Battle of Trafalgar, and if you ever go to England, you will see, Lord Nelson. He was the one, Lord Nelson. And that's what made the British so great, because it's like, wow, they were able to defeat the French and the Spanish. And they didn't have the amount of ships, per se, like the French and the Spanish combined. You see, so back in those days, in 1823, the United States didn't have anything the equivalent of what the British had. Sure. And the reason that the British lost in North America was because the French were helping the American colonists. That's why. That's why the British lost. They were helping them, giving like monies and so forth, armaments and so forth. So the French played a very big, important deal in the American Revolution, and that's why, because these were arch enemies. Remember that, the British and the French, they were arch enemies in those days. They never liked each other, and they still don't like each other even now. And they were helping. They were helping the colonists to fight the British. You see, but if it were not for the French, chances are there would have been no American independence from Great Britain, because Britain was a very, very powerful country in those days. So when the people post on YouTube, well, and they talk about the Monroe Doctrine or what have you. The Monroe Doctrine didn't mean anything, because America was only like 49 years old of a country. It was a weak nation. It was just starting out, and definitely, if you went in the high seas, if you went in the high seas and you had a battle between the British and the Americans would have lost back in those days, because the British were that powerful. You see? Yeah. And I think in one of their songs, their national song, well, they never had any independence. So where they sing, "Rule Britannia, rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves. Britons never, never will be slaves." So that's the whole idea. They were proud of themselves and they were saying, rule Britannia, Britannia ruled the waves. And the British did rule the waves. It wasn't America ruled the waves. So this whole idea behind the Monroe Doctrine, well, I mean, if you put it to test, you couldn't stop the British and you couldn't stop the Spanish from coming into the Western Hemisphere if they really wanted, you know, like in South America or in the West Indies or what have you. You couldn't stop them. No, not back in 1823. But this is what the propaganda is you see on YouTube, that they say, talk about, if America could have the Monroe Doctrine, then Russia can have this own doctrine too, that you can't come into Ukraine and put weapons in there or what have you. Okay. Personally, in my opinion, I think the way Ukraine should be, it should be like how Finland is. Finland is neutral. I think, let me see. I think Sweden might be neutral too, because Finland and Sweden, they're closer to, like Finland has borders with Russia, for example. I think Sweden maybe. So the whole idea is, okay, you don't want to take a stance where you give the impression that you're going to be part of NATO and you're going to have weapons right there next to Russia. So Russia has certain concerns. We must recognize that, you see. And maybe that's the way Ukraine should be. And say, well, you know what? We share a border with Russia and we're just going to remain neutral. That's it. Like how Switzerland is neutral, you remain neutral, and you don't take sides or what have you. And with that way, you can exist. You see, but when you look at countries like Lithuania, like the Baltic countries, that's way up there, going way, way up. Lithuania and so forth. Those countries don't want to have anything to do with Russia. Estonia, for example. No. They remember the old Soviet days and the totalitarianism and so forth. And they don't want a repeat of that. They've seen it before. And they want to get away from that. See? And they don't want to be controlled by Russia neither. So that's the whole idea behind that. And I respect that. And that's why they joined NATO. So that they don't have a problem. But in the meantime, countries like Finland is not part of NATO, and Finland decides to be like neutral, I guess, and don't get involved like that. So maybe if Ukraine was like Finland, there won't be a war today. So I think that's what they should do. After all the war and everything is over, they can say, look, let's sit down and let's do this. We're not going to join NATO. We're not going to be that. We're not going to give the Russians any reason to be anxious and come in and attack us or what have you. So we're just going to remain neutral. And I think that's the way it should be. But these kind of comments about supporting or backing or going in lockstep with the Chinese Communist Party, with whatever they say, supporting Russia, if you're a free person and you live in another part of the world and you're Chinese, you should be able to be free to express your opinion, and you shouldn't have to go along with the official version of the Chinese government, you see. And unfortunately, like I said, there are many people on social media who are not regular people. These are people who are working for the Chinese government, and they post it online. That's their job. That is their job. And they will go through YouTube, and if you check some of their channels, they really have nothing on it, no content, nothing. But they open accounts so they can respond and they can agitate. That's what it comes down to. You see, so like the Russians did, like during the last election there, I had people tell me, well, why are you supporting Biden? Biden is an old man. Why are you supporting him? And there's nothing on the channel that says I was supporting Biden. There's nothing there that says that I'm supporting Biden. But this is the way they come out and talk, you see. And they say, well, he's an old man. Well, the thing is, he and Biden and Trump are just a few years apart. You know, like maybe 3 years, 4 years. That's not old. I mean, so if Biden is old and Trump is old too, yeah, that's what that amounts to. But yet they ask me, why are you supporting? And I believe these were like Russian people that were paid, because the Russians were all over the channel, YouTube, trying to convince people not to vote for Biden, and making up kinds of different stories and so forth. Saying Biden said this about black people ages ago, and Biden was for the crime bill and all. No, I mean, come on. These were not American people. These were Russian people, paid Russian people, that were having these conversations out there, trying to tilt the election toward Trump, so Trump could be in office. And if Trump were in office, he definitely won't be helping Ukraine. he won't be sending millions of dollars worth of equipment to Ukraine. That's for sure. You see, that's for sure. So the Russians really missed the fact that they were not able to get Trump reelected. They tried very hard, but it didn't work out, and that's too bad. And I hope they don't try the next time for 2024.